Record button has also been pressed. And we are a minute past. So hello, welcome as people are starting to roll in. Thank you for joining us on this getting a little cozier fall evening. Today we have an education session on cancer changes everything, navigating disruptions in work, school, and home life. Before we get into the bulk of why we're here, I'm going to go over a little boring old housekeeping with you all. So this is a webinar. I've got two buttons that I need you to know about at the bottom of your Zoom screen. One of them is the Q&A button. It's got, let me turn off everything. It's got two cute little chat bubbles in there. So at any point throughout this presentation, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to direct specifically to our wonderful presenters today, please pop those in the Q&A. That's where we're going to neatly package them for you there. You can pop those questions in at any time you want. Dedicated time will be set at the end of the presentation to answer those questions. So no need to get antsy if you don't see your question getting answered right away. There will be time at the end specifically for that. If you're trying to reach me at any point, who am I? I always forget this part. My name is Gloria. I'm the virtual program coordinator here at Gilda's Toronto, and I'll be your technical/social support for the next hour. So you can reach me in the chat box, which is just a little bit to the right of the Q&A button. If you don't see it there, you might have to press the three dots that say more, and then the chat button will appear there. As mentioned, this is a webinar. We cannot see you. We cannot hear you. So it is really important that you use these two options to communicate with us and so that we can interact throughout this hour. This webinar is being recorded. If you registered, you will be getting a recording. So hello from the past. And beyond that, if you need to reach us or would like to reach us for any information at any point in time, please send us an email at program@gildasclubtoronto.org. Even if you're not a member, we are more than happy to guide you in the most appropriate direction for support. Now, who is going to be leading us through this next hour? We have Carly Fleming and Theia Jamal-Sunderji, who I will do a little bit of a reading on them before we get going. This presentation is presented by Carly Fleming, registered psychotherapist, and Theia Jamal-Sunderji, registered psychotherapist qualifying. Carly is the owner of Everwell Counseling and has been working in the field of psychotherapy and oncology for 20 years. Theia is a therapist intern with lived experience of cancer and an interest in cancer, stress burnout, and acculturation. So without further ado, I will stop my screen share and pass it on to you two.
Thank you so much, Gloria. So my name is Carly, and I'm co-presenting today with Theia, who you can see on the screen. And I will get us started in our presentation, do a bit of an introduction about what we are going to talk about tonight. And then Theia will do the second half of the presentation. And towards the end, we would be more than happy to have a little bit of a conversation, even though we can't see you. We are very interested in hearing about questions or thoughts. Sometimes it doesn't need to be a question that you may have, more sort of something that's been on your mind or something that, came up for you when we were talking. We're going to leave some time at the end. So just know that if you're wondering or if it's on your mind, chances are it's on somebody else's mind as well. So let me get started with sharing my screen to get the presentation going. Theia, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation? You cannot see the presentation.
It just shows click to exit full screen.
Well, yes, it does, doesn't it? Okay. We had this, hold on a second. We had this up and running one moment ago. I am going to have to go back over to my desktop and reload that presentation. It'll just take me 1 minute. Theia, why don't you do a moment of introduction, if you don't mind, while I'm just going over to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So as Carly mentioned and Gloria mentioned, my name is Theia. I am currently working under the supervision of Carly, and Carly and I work together because we both have an expressed interest in the cancer population. And as shared, I am someone who has lived experience. I'm a cancer survivor now. And so I kind of have a passion to support other individuals and have these talks and work with them as a therapist to support them through their journeys and navigating what their world looks like now. So I look forward to sharing some insight and having some conversations with all of you today.
Thank you so much, Theia. Okay, so my next question is, Can you see it now? Yay. Okay. Thank goodness. All right. So we were asked by Gilda's Toronto to do a presentation about navigating disruptions to work, school, and home life during cancer. And of course, that's a massive topic. And so what we have tried to do is take some perspectives that come from our experience as therapists in relation to who comes to us and what we know about the struggles that they bring and how we have been able to help them. So we're going to get into that in just a second, but it is nice to meet everyone. And this webinar is designed for anybody really in any stage of the cancer journey, whether that be a young person who's navigating something that is more related to and the disruptions are more related to school, or somebody else who is sort of later on in their life who are navigating disruptions in work and home and family life, as well as caregivers, as well as folks who are friends and supporters. And certainly even if you're past treatment phase and into remission or survivorship, we're hoping that there's some interesting things in here for you as well. So thank you for being here and welcome. Okay, so we have split our presentation today into 3 sections. 1 is emotions, 2 is acceptance, and 3 is communication. It's hard to disconnect these 3 different topics from one another. So as we move through our talk tonight, you'll sort of see similar themes coming up in all 3. But what I'd love to invite you to do, if you would like to take any notes, grab a pen and paper, if you're on you're on your computer, pull up a document that allows you to jot a few things down. We certainly know that when we are presented with a lot of information, especially as it relates to our sort of like personal, emotional, mental well-being, it can be overwhelming. So there may be a couple things that come out in our presentation tonight that you'd like to jot down. And we've tried to keep it digestible, but we are going to be presenting on quite a bit of information. And I just want to acknowledge that, what we want you to do is take what resonates with you and see if it can be helpful, and leave whatever does not. So if it's helpful, take it. If it's not helpful, leave it. Theia and I have worked to put this presentation together based on our personal and professional understanding, but it may or may not fit for you, hoping that some parts of it do fit for you. In relation to emotions, we're going to spend a little bit of time giving space for the importance of emotions and understanding some of the limitations to why culturally and societally we sometimes don't pay enough attention to our emotions. We'll introduce some topics around self-compassion. We'll talk about what we'll all resonate with, which is a sort of a masking and an unmasking of emotion that we all do every single day. We'll then move on to acceptance, and this is where Theia will start her part of the presentation. We'll introduce you to one of my favorite concepts, which is psychological flexibility, which is very much connected to acceptance. We're going to talk about putting yourself first in the context of self-compassion and talking about how complicated that can be. And then when we move on to communication, we're going to look at a few different things that can get in the way of communication, as well as highlight the importance of communicating with ourselves. When we think of communication, most often we think about it as something that is happening between the individual and something outside of us, right? Another person, whether that be, verbally or written. But what we would love to introduce is the idea that the foundation of communication actually starts with the way you communicate with yourself. So I'm excited for that part of the presentation. All right. Moving right along, I'm going to start the presentation here by talking about emotions, and just reminding you as we go, feel free to pop anything into the chat and we'll get to it. We will get to it a little bit later. So, whoops, I went too far. Okay, first, I want to start by just giving a bit of background information about emotions. It's really interesting when you start to try to collect definitions or descriptions of emotions. You find just an incredible variety of different ways of thinking about it. There really isn't one scientifically understood definition of emotion. I would love to invite you to consider emotions as a felt sense that you have. I hope this wording resonates with you. a felt sense that you have that comes about in relation to internal or external experiences. It sounds a little wishy-washy, but it's the best we can do to sort of give an overview of what the idea of an emotion is. What our culture has done, understandably, because it is necessary for communication, is we've given labels to emotions. So we call them angry, sad, happy, scared. Of course, those are just words, but we've all grown up with those words and we all have our own version of a definition for each of them. When you begin to welcome emotion more into your vocabulary, into your experience, we always will encourage people to try to feel the emotion in your body, have a sense of what the emotion is feeling like, as opposed to first and foremost giving it a name and trying to analytically understand it. Of course, that's a component of it. How we think affects how we feel affects how we think, but they are not one and the same. Very often emotions do involve a physical sensation. And so it's really quite interesting. And I would encourage you, if you did go and get a piece of paper to jot something down, just to jot down a reminder to yourself to do some exploration about how different emotions feel in your body. It's really an interesting it can be quite enjoyable actually to start to understand emotions from a more physical sense than just this like thought cognitive place. We all sort of live within a society, here in Ontario, here in Canada, and across the world as a very vast generalization, we sort of live in a society where emotions are not well understood and they are not given a lot of attention. Very often emotions can get in the way of, things like productivity and showing up to our jobs. And our society is so structured around those things that emotions have sort of been pushed aside. As therapists, we like to encourage people to refocus on their emotional experience. And so in this presentation, I'd love to invite you to give yourself permission to have feelings and know that there are no right or wrong, good or bad. They come, they go, they mix up, and this is part of being human. There's no need to judge them. Just me saying this one person one time is probably not enough, but as part of your journey, that's the invitation. I do want to acknowledge that when we bottle up our emotions, we can find that some pretty significant problems can arise. And I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes, but let's just stop in my little definition conversation and move along to something else for the time being. So in the context of us not being well-versed culturally in emotion, Theia and I developed just this really validating, open invitation to expand your vocabulary as it relates to emotion. So what I'm going to do is read out some permission statements and some normalizing statements. And I would encourage you, again, if you got that paper or are jotting things down, to choose one from the permission side and one from the normalized side that feels to you like you haven't really been saying this to yourself. Maybe I'll read it and you'll kind of go, ugh, and you'll feel something. If there's one or two like that, jot them down. So let's start with some permission statements. I give myself permission to feel. I give myself permission to grieve. I give myself permission to be vulnerable. I give myself permission to practice self-compassion. I give myself permission to seek support. I give myself permission to find moments of joy and happiness amidst the challenges. I give myself permission to set boundaries with others and myself. I give myself permission to process my emotions at my own pace. You just take a moment to feel which of those feel particularly resonant for you, and I encourage you to write it down. While we give permission, we also want to normalize. So again, let's start with some language that you might be able to use for yourself. It's completely normal to feel overwhelmed. Change is a part of life, and it's okay to feel uneasy. Cancer is a tough journey, and it's okay to struggle. You're not alone in feeling this way. Feeling a mix of emotions, from fear to anger to sadness, is an entirely normal part of being human. Cancer can disrupt the sense of normalcy we once had, and there's no right way to feel about that. Emotions are like waves. They ebb and flow. Some days you may feel overwhelmed, while others you might find moments of peace. So if there's one or two of those that hit you as I was talking and you realized, oh, that's something I haven't been saying to myself, I encourage you to write it down. Hoping that you've written one of them down, or at least holding it in your mind, I am going to just invite you to hold that into tomorrow. Hold that for the rest of the evening. Hold it into tomorrow. Go through your day tomorrow. See if there is any shift in the way that you relate to yourself with putting this intention of permission and normalization into your vocabulary. I hope that there will be. And you may see that beginning to interact with your emotions is something that can be really beneficial. Okay. I like this metaphor. Suppressing negative and hard emotions is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater in a pool. We can all imagine that, right? At first, it seems manageable, but as you push it down, it becomes increasingly difficult to control. Eventually, if you keep suppressing it, that beach ball will find a way to pop up, often in unexpected and forceful ways. Such a good metaphor. We all suppress our emotions some of the time, and that's healthy. When we are needing to, show up for our life in a way that feels really important, we may need to put our emotional feelings, our emotional reactions aside and show up. It's very real. It's very normal. It's important. But when we do that a lot or all the time, we can find that they well up and they pop up in ways that we don't intend, and that can be actually quite damaging to us. So I want to be sure that the message here is not that suppressing emotions is bad. There's no shame in that. And like everything else in life, what we're really looking for is a balance, that we know when to put them aside and show up for our day or our life, our person, our thing, but that also we know when it's safe and when we can trust ourselves to express. When we don't express our emotions, we can find ourselves needing to numb a lot. It's very familiar, the numbing of sort of scrolling on a phone, or the numbing of sometimes overeating, or the numbing of maybe even using substances, engaging in a lot of work and a lot of sort of over responsibility. These are just a handful of pulling ourselves away from relationships. These are just a few things that can happen when we don't express our emotions. And so, well, that could be a whole other presentation, but just to say that there is something very, very beneficial of letting it out. And I always love to remind people that the word emotion has the word motion in it, right? I mean, I don't think it's the root of the word. The root of the word, I think, comes from emote, but I don't know Latin. But let's just remind ourselves, like, emotion is meant to move. Like, it's meant to move. That is the design of this system within our bodies. So whenever you're wondering if in fact you should push it down, remember it's meant to move. Okay. I'm going to just quickly go through. I'm realizing I'm talking too much. So quickly look at self-soothing as a way to equip you with tools to navigate difficult emotions. A lot of times we think about self-soothing as something that children and babies learn to do, and we hope that they do, but this is throughout our lifespan. The ability to self-soothe during a difficult emotional time is key. And these things like mindfulness, positive affirmations, journaling, deep breathing, self-care, engaging in the senses. Again, this could be its own presentation by itself. But when people say to me, oh, I don't want to let the emotions out because I'm afraid that they'll take over and I won't be able to put them back in. Firstly, that isn't typically how emotions work. They typically have a natural track of a beginning, a middle, and an end. But these are the kinds of things that we can reassure you that when you bring self-soothing into the mix, you won't get stuck. And you don't have to rely on anyone else. You can do these things yourself. Okay. I'm going to let me just make sure. Yeah, this is the last slide of mine. So I think I'm going to do, no, second last of mine. Okay. I want to acknowledge in the context of this conversation about emotions, the real phenomenon of toxic positivity. You have all felt it. I'm sure of it. I don't know you, but I'm sure you have. And this is when, you might be struggling, you might be having a hard time, and people in your life, or even a voice within yourself, says, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Don't you worry about it. You're going to be great. Be optimistic. We can understand why that's important. But actually what that can serve to do is stuff those hard emotions even further. So people who think that they're being helpful with their positivity can force those negative, difficult, sad, angry, grieving emotions down and make them hide even further. And they can have the result can be that you put on a mask and you say, yes, that's right. Everything's going very well. Thank you. I'm very positive about it. And now you're sending messages to yourself that you don't want to be a burden, that you don't want to create obligation. But all of that is the mask, right? That is sort of an effect of that toxic positivity. I'm sure you can relate. I'll end with, and my bit of this presentation, with just having a real moment of perspective of what happens when people around us either are overly positive, or they want to support us in ways that are not emotionally attuned. So something that I know happens all the time, it's been around in my life as well, that when, somebody in a person's life is diagnosed with cancer or any other major life event that has significant difficulty, you'll see that people are able to jump in and offer, meals, or hopefully they will. That's maybe not assume that everyone has that circle, but people will offer meals. They'll offer rides. They'll offer childcare. These are so important, obviously. But rarely are those same people able to say, let's sit down and talk about what's hard. And so we need both. We need the perspective and the balance of being able to ask for help emotionally, as well as ask for help and receive help practically. So it may be that when Theia's going to talk a little bit about communication and asking for help, it may be that asking for emotional help becomes even more important for some people than asking for the practical help. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Theia, and she's going to get us started on the topic of acceptance.
Thank you so much, Carly. So as she mentioned, we'll be talking about acceptance now in the context of a cancer diagnosis. And so acceptance, essentially in a nutshell, can mean making room for those painful emotions, the sensations, and even those feelings that we come across. And so it involves opening up and allowing the emotions in, making space for them rather than fighting for them and resisting them, running from them, or even getting overwhelmed by them. So when we first start, we're going to think, okay, well, there's this common question, right? Where do we go from there? And so the first step on this journey is recognizing the weight of cancer and its diagnosis and the emotional impact, right? Just as Carly talked about. You want to normalize these emotions, right? The fear, the anger, the sadness, and the uncertainty, those surface level emotions. And it's also important to acknowledge your past self and create room for grief, right? Because so much has changed for you, including who you are and how you see the world. So it's important to create space for that. And so the second step is then embracing this new normal, right? Life after cancer, it can be quite different, from what you're used to before. But remember that accepting this change doesn't mean giving up on life. It means discovering new paths to living life to the fullest. And so in these moments, you want to take a little bit of a breather, And just remind yourself that you can reflect on things that have evolved and you can find new ways to adapt to life, right? What you're used to can look a little different. And so the way to do this is through step number 3, which is probably the most transformative step of all, which is Carly's favorite thing, right? This is something called psychological flexibility. And essentially, this is your superpower, right? It's the skill of fully embracing the present moment, staying open to your experiences, and taking action that aligns with something that truly means something to you. And so it's about realizing that what used to work for you might need a little adjustment now. And you know what? That is totally okay, right? You can take time to find your footing. There's no need to rush. And you can push aside the pressure to maintain that same level of productivity that you had before, because your journey is unique and it's okay to go at your own pace. And that's something we forget to tell ourselves. And so flexibility is the key part here, right? Life has thrown you this curveball and you have to be ready to adjust your expectations. It's kind of like switching from this rigid schedule to a more adapted life, right? And by giving yourself this room for change and adaptation, you can better navigate the uncertainties that life will bring. It's also a reminder to be gentle with yourself and to embrace more of a flexible approach with your life expectations. And so as you can see, there's like this little video on the side. It's a metaphor to demonstrate psychological flexibility. We put that there in case me and Carly didn't talk long enough and had a chance to play it. But as you can see, we like to talk a lot. So we might watch it at the end if there's time, but if there isn't, that's totally okay. So, all right. So something that most of you may notice is that often in life, we're going to put others first. And it occurs, and there's nothing to be ashamed of that for. It's something we actually all do. But when you're facing challenges of cancer, self-compassion is essentially your lifeline, right? And it's a way to be gentle with yourself. And so your energy, it's precious and it's limited, and it takes time to recognize that. But it's important to recognize that. So it's absolutely essential to take time for yourself to recharge. It's not selfish, but it's a vital part of your well-being. And so in this phase, it's crucial to embrace the power of no, right? Remember that no is a complete sentence and it requires absolutely no explanation. You were entitled to saying that. Your life has shifted, and so is your availability, your capacity, desires, and values. And so saying no is an act of self-respect. And you don't have to be ashamed or feel guilty about it. It's okay. It's a way to honor yourself. And it's one of the most valuable lessons in learning to listen to your body and be in tune with the present moment. And so it's so simple to get caught up in all of these expectations and these obligations that are set out for you, right? But when you're facing something as significant as cancer, you have to put yourself first. It's okay, it's expected, it's right. And so instead of feeling the pressure to meet these external expectations or what you think you should be doing, remember to pause and just check in with your body and your emotions and your needs. And so acting on what you truly require for your well-being, rather than conforming to these societal or even self-imposed pressures, is an act of self-compassion. It's a reminder that your health, your self-care, all of these things should be a top priority, because your journey is not just about surviving, but it's about thriving through self-awareness and self-compassion. So now, sometimes it's a bit of a bigger responsibility to be your own caregiver, right? And so we have to ask for help. But society and cultural norms and our own internal beliefs often can be a barrier to seeking the help that we truly need. And as you can see, there are many listed on the slide, but it's not even an exhaustive list. It doesn't even touch the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. And because all these exist, sometimes we allow it to get the better of us. So I just want to share a very brief personal perspective that kind of highlights the complexities of asking for help. Because while it may seem straightforward, I can attest that it's probably one of the most challenging and exhausting things to do. So during my battle with cancer, I found myself plagued by that fear of appearing weak, right? In my world, I always had to be strong and I always had to be independent because I was the oldest daughter in a traditional home. That was just my expectation. And so this fear, it led me to shouldering that gravity of my experience all on my own, including that pain, the emotional struggles, and the new reality that came with the diagnosis at the age of 16. And so regrettably, this became the most difficult aspect of my journey, which I now can see that I could have avoided. And so it's imperative that we destigmatize the act of asking for help. I'm going to highlight that one more time. It's imperative that we destigmatize the act of asking for help. Instead of viewing it as a sign of weakness, you want to consider the courage and the strength that is required to show that vulnerability and to advocate for yourself. It's a matter of having two choices and going with the "it makes me weak" or "it shows that I'm strong" option. Both of these exist, and the choice is ultimately yours. So I just want to stress the importance of seeking and maintaining support, even when you don't feel an immediate need, right? Everyone on some level requires a supportive shoulder from time to time. And so by being proactive in securing your support network, you ensure that it's readily accessible in those moments that you need it the most. And so this is where sometimes therapy can be helpful. As a therapist, we have to be neutral and be there to support you through all of your feelings and thoughts. There's this absence of judgment, a layer of privacy, and it's a place where vulnerability and difficult feelings, they're encouraged and they're accepted. And so this could be a really helpful resource for you. So I just want to put this into perspective for a second, okay? So we tend to have these two common scenarios. And by all means, this is not exhaustive, and it's not all inclusive of everything we could experience, but they're the more common ones that we've found that we can experience. And so we have the best case scenario where people ask, "How are you feeling?" And you can choose to respond truthfully about your well-being. Rather than defaulting to this polite and automatic response, instead you actually say, "Actually, I'm not having a great day today. I'm really struggling." This requires you to check in with yourself and maintain awareness of your feelings while still being your authentic self. And that's not something we often do. Then there is that worst case scenario. And we're going to take it from this most common gender role expectation perspective, because this is what we see in society so often. So when we have men, for example, there's this expectation to be constantly brave and wear this facade of strength when asked about your well-being. And then for women, there's a societal role of being this caregiver, which can result in minimizing their true feelings and not asking for what they need because it may be perceived selfish and contrary to their expected roles of being a caregiver to others. And so the concept of authenticity then goes out the window. And so does that supportive shoulder that you need. And so as a whole, acceptance plays this big role, and it starts with you. And that's something to think about. And so if you have questions about what we just chatted about, toss them into the chat and we'll answer them towards the end. But that's just a little snippet of acceptance. And then we can move on to communication. So, oh, Carly, could you go back one second? Stay on the topic for a second. So now that we've kind of delved into this fascinating world of emotions and the art of acceptance, we can shift our attention to this exciting world of communication. More specifically, we're going to focus on how you talk to yourself, how you connect with others, and how these interactions shape your world. So during your journey through cancer, it's vital to recognize how you communicate with yourself because this internal dialogue profoundly impacts your emotional well-being. Some of the common practices that impact your mental health include something called black and white thinking and minimizing your experiences. And by all means, this is not exhaustive, but this is some of the more common ones that we see. And so black and white thinking is perceiving your situation in extreme terms as either all good or all bad. And so an example of this is you have a person who's been recently diagnosed with cancer who receives news about their treatment progress. They might think, well, if the latest results are good, then everything is perfect and I'm completely fine. But if my test results show any signs of concern, then I'm hopeless and I'm never going to recover. So in simple terms, this is just thinking on either one end or the other end of the spectrum, right? You're kind of like forgetting the middle side of this. And so when we engage in black and white thinking, the first step is to become aware that you're engaged in black and white thinking, right? Pay attention to your inner dialogue and recognize when you're using terms like always, never, perfect, or hopeless, and more. When you notice black and white thinking, you want to question its validity. You want to ask yourself if the situation genuinely fits the extreme term. You want to find evidence that supports a more balanced and nuanced perspective instead of seeing things as either all good or all bad. So essentially, you're looking for that middle ground and recognizing that life, including your cancer journey, often exists in this shade of gray. There's going to be ups and downs, positive and negative aspects, and complexities in between. And this is how you can pull yourself out of that black and white thinking. So then we as humans also have this tendency to downplay and minimize the gravity of cancer and compare ourselves to others. And sometimes this is a defense mechanism to shield ourselves from this emotional weight. And so an example of this is a person who's been living with cancer for a really long time. They may regularly tell themselves, well, it's just a small thing compared to what others are going through. It's not as bad as it could be, and I shouldn't complain or feel upset about it. So put simply, you take away from what you're experiencing by comparing yourself to others. And essentially, you're invalidating your own experience. So when you're minimizing and comparing your experience, you want to try to pay attention to your thoughts and how you're talking to yourself about your cancer experience. When you're identifying and comparing yourself to others, see that you're minimizing your own struggles. When you catch yourself comparing, challenge those thoughts. Remind yourself that your experience is unique and valid, and that the comparisons often don't reflect this full picture. Instead of looking outward and making these comparisons, look inwards, right? Draw your attention inwards. Consider your own feelings and your own needs and experiences without all of this outside noise. Replace these minimizing languages with self-affirming and validating statements, right? So for example, instead of saying, I shouldn't complain, others have it worse, you tell yourself, my feelings and my challenges are valid, and it's okay to express them. So this is when it comes down to one of the other more important pieces, where we want to legitimize our needs, right? So when you confront the gravity of a cancer diagnosis, you enter this world of immense challenges, both physically and emotionally. And it's a journey that often requires you to tap into your resilience and courage. It's also to understand that maybe in a hospital, there's going to be this system of round-the-clock support in place. And maybe you're going to like it or you're not going to, but it exists. Yet, once you step outside of those hospital walls, you're going to find yourself in a really different reality. One where this support isn't going to exist until you actively seek it out. And so here's the key point. You're allowed to ask for help. It's a recognition that the journey through cancer is challenging and it's heavy. And it's perfectly acceptable to take up the space you need in order to navigate that. Whether it's going to be emotional support, It's going to be practical assistance, or even simply a listening ear. You have the right to create your own support network. So embrace the power of reaching out, because your cancer journey is significant and you deserve the care, the compassion, and resources to help you on your path to healing and well-being. And so this starts with you legitimizing what you need and giving yourself permission, just as Carly discussed, to advocate for yourself, picking one of those sentences and adding that to your vocabulary. Now, part of advocating for yourself comes with using this cancer card, which I'm sure many of you have heard about and probably have very mixed feelings about. I know I did. And as it says, playing the cancer card is not a game of cards. It's the hand we've been dealt in life, and it's our reality. I just want you to take a moment to just hear that. As you know, living with cancer is going to bring about a whirlwind of emotions and challenges and adjustments that are unlike anything else anyone's experienced. Yet it's not uncommon for those of you facing this battle to feel guilty about using this cancer card. But it's essential to recognize that it is necessary to do so. Your needs are valid, whether they're physical or emotional. And that asking for support or understanding is not about asking for special treatment. It's about prioritizing yourself. It's about shifting the way you think about it. When you're dealing with the stress and the exhaustion that cancer is going to bring, the cancer card is a way to reduce that impact. It's about keeping those around you informed, reducing pressure on yourself, and seeking understanding. And so it's not selfish. It's once again that form of self-compassion that you need. And so you try your hardest not to let that guilt hold you back, because it's your well-being that matters, and it's okay to use the cancer card when you genuinely need it. You can keep it in your wallet and pull it out when you're ready to use it. Okay, so you've heard me say this a million times, but asking for help is important and it's essential. But it's also important to recognize a really real and potential common response. And this might not be something you're ready to hear, but it's a reality. When you ask for help, some people may hesitate or even say no. And this is not because they don't care about you, but it's probably because they're scared. Cancer is overwhelming, right? And many people find it difficult to navigate conversations and emotions surrounding it, just as we do sometimes, right? And so the mere mention of this word cancer, it can be intimidating, and it can evoke fear of the unknown or even painful memories of their own experiences. And I know it's easier said than done, but it is absolutely crucial to not take these responses personally. It's not about you, but rather it's their own discomfort with the topic. Maybe offering them some information can help bridge that gap, making it a little bit easier for them to offer support when they're ready. But remember that their no doesn't reflect a lack of care, right? But rather it's this profound impact that cancer has on so many lives. So essentially, this is some food for thought as you prepare to ask for help, because this could potentially happen. So then comes how to ask for help. We keep talking about help, but how do you do it, right? So when asking for help, you have to consider who you can pass the hat to when you need them. This can be anyone. It can be a member of your family, friends, support groups, or anyone else. Then the next step is to ask for help with confidence. And to do that, there's a few things that you have to keep in mind. And these are just small little techniques. They might work, they might not work, depending on what you want to do, but this is kind of like the trick to confidence. And so you want to know exactly what kind of help you need and why, right? Being clear in your own mind about what you're asking for it will help you communicate your needs more confidently. You want to find a comfortable and private setting to discuss your needs with this person that you're asking for help for. And this can make that conversation feel bold and supportive. And lastly, when you speak with someone about your needs, you need to maintain eye contact. Now, sometimes this is something that some people are not okay with, and that's totally okay. But in the most ideal world, it's very useful because it's very confident. And it allows you to convey that confidence and that sincerity in what you're saying. And so an example of asking for help with confidence can be, I'm feeling determined to beat cancer, and I need assistance with transportation to my medical appointments, particularly on Wednesday, October 25th at 6 p.m. Can you support me this way? Your help will contribute significantly to my progress and peace of mind. Now, I know this is not how we actually talk. It's like a mouthful, right? But it gets the point across, right? It's clear, it's specific, and it outlines your needs. So whatever that looks like for you, that's how you can approach this conversation. And so lastly, you can also then identify a proxy. This is someone who can ask for help on your behalf when you can't. And it's a smart and proactive step in navigating the hurdles of cancer or any other significant health challenge. It ensures that your support system remains strong, even during times when you're too unwell or overwhelmed to ask for that help directly. And your proxy may not be able to assist you with the exact help you need, but they can be that person that takes that first step for you to ask for that help. Now, we've discussed the importance of asking for help and how to ask for help. But what happens when asking for help becomes this emotional tug of war? One unexpected challenge is when you hesitate to ask for help because you're concerned that the person you reach out to might need you to take care of their feelings instead. And so it's a delicate emotional tug of war that can create these barriers to the support that you need. So in these situations, it's essential to recognize that people with cancer are not just grappling with their own emotions, but also navigating the complexities of other people's reactions. It can be a struggle when someone really close to you doesn't have control over their own emotions, and the responses to your needs become overwhelming. It's important to remember that their reactions don't reflect your worthiness of support. Rather, it's often reflecting their own fears and their uncertainties and their struggles dealing with cancer. So one way to approach this challenge is through open and honest communication. And this is harder than it may seem, but in an ideal world, you'll let your loved one know that you appreciate their care and their concern. But right now, you need them to be a source of support. You want to share your feelings and concerns openly, emphasizing that this is a time when you need to lean on others and not the other way around. And by having these conversations, you can build boundaries and a pathway towards healthier exchange of support. And if it's not an option for you, because it might not be, there is a second option, which we can speak to, and that is therapy. In therapy, the primary focus will be on your emotions, your feelings, and your needs. Therapists are highly trained professionals who excel at creating that safe space while still maintaining these emotional boundaries. And so our role is to support you and to guide you, ensuring that the therapeutic process remains centered around your well-being and your growth, and not our emotions. You won't need to take care of your therapist or even worry about making room for our emotions in this journey of self-discovery and in healing. We're here to help explore with you, to understand with you, and to address your concerns, making this therapeutic experience, once again, all about you. And so if you struggle with this emotional tug of war with the people in your life, therapy could be something to consider if you're ready, right? Not everyone is ready, but when you're ready, we're there for you. Okay, so now one way to approach this challenge is through like that open and honest communication, having a therapist, right? And all of these things. All of this brings the idea that people need to be in your corner at some shape or form. But I want to share with you a way to emphasize this very strong people in your corner idea through this most exaggerated way possible. Okay. So I want you to think of facing cancer as braving this fierce storm at sea. Okay. When you're all alone by yourself, it's like trying to steer a small boat through the rough waters with absolutely no assistance. You're constantly hit by waves of fear and uncertainty, and you're struggling to keep the boat afloat. Now, seeking help is like having a team of experienced sailors with you. They know how to handle the turbulent waters. They can take turns steering the ship, guide you, and lend a hand when you're tired. So you're no longer battling the storm on your own. On the flip side, isolation is like raising the sails and drifting further from the shore. This loneliness makes the challenges even tougher. You're kind of trapped in your own thoughts and fears with no one to share that load. And it's kind of as if the storm never ends, right? You're left adrift, and it can lead to feelings of hopelessness and mental distress, kind of like an endless night at sea. And so asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a lifeline. It can help you endure the storm, share the burden, and ensure that you're not navigating those turbulent waters alone. So by embracing the support, you boost your chances of surviving and coming out stronger and more resilient. And so I will leave you with that thought. And I just want to thank you all for your attention and engagement. And if you have any sort of questions, keep adding them to the chat. I'm going to give the floor back to Carly to chime in.
Thank you so much, Theia. I hope that each of the people who are listening and watching have been able to find a couple of things, maybe more than a couple, that are useful and relevant to them in their journey of either having cancer or being the support person of a loved one with cancer. And we're just ending with this slide to show you how to get in touch with us. If you wanted to reach out after our session, if there's anything that either one of us spoke about that you wanted to learn more about or find out about the ways that Everwell can support you, we're here for you. So feel free to reach out. Here is how to do it on the screen. And so Gloria, oh, yay, you're back. I don't know if there's any questions. I don't know how to see them, but maybe you can point me in the right direction.
Yes, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. So a reminder, it's in that bottom bar Q&A if you want to press that to type anything in this last few moments. But if not, as Carly and Theia have mentioned here, they are able to be contacted. You can contact them through these outlets over here. And you will be receiving a recording. So if you're registered, you're getting a recording of this webinar. So hopefully you weren't too crazily taken down any notes because it will be neatly packaged for you. But I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So I will just say thank you both very, very much for taking us through this hour and educating us in this way. It was incredibly informative and very digestible and accessible. So thank you so much for taking the time to share this with our members. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was lovely to connect with you at Gilda's Toronto.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks. Bye.